G'day everyone, welcome to the Outback Packers podcast, the podcast where two mates from all the way across the world have a yarn talking Packers football and the green and gold. I'm Nick Gregory, today joined by no one. Today is going to be a special solo episode. So I did lie to you a little bit there in the intro, but Joe is just resting on his way back from Lambeau Field, the promised land. So today I'm going to be taking over the show and just kind of want to take a look over the tenure of Brian Gutekunst. So I'm really a big fan of a lot of the things that he's done, but as any GM is, even the best GMs in the league, they all make mistakes, they all have missteps, maybe they misjudge something, and I just want to take a second to have a look over what that's looked like. I mean, this is year 6 of Gutekunst's tenure with the team, and I think it's quite reasonable to judge his moves now. You know, when it comes to things like rookie classes and free agent classes, sometimes, you know, they can have impact in year 1 and they can fizzle out, or it can be a more long-term move. And I just want to take a look at, now we've seen the full effects and the full extent, and, you know, we've seen some of these classes fade away. Some of them have become the new core of the team. And yeah, we're just going to have a look at that today. So I just want to get started by kind of taking a look back to 7 years ago now, 2017. This is a roster, you know, the team missed the playoffs. They went 7-9, I believe. I should probably check that. In any case, my computer's not agreeing with me. So this team did not make the playoffs. Rodgers was injured. This is the collarbone season. This is, you know, kind of the end of a lot of things in Green Bay. This is the last year of Ted Thompson, obviously, and, you know, after making the playoffs consecutively for since 2009 at that point, you know, this is the first time they had missed the playoffs, and, you know, everyone really did believe that Aaron Rodgers was going to come back on the broken collarbone in the Carolina game, and they really thought he was going to, you know, run the table and they were going to make the playoffs. But I think a big reason why that didn't come to fruition is because of how awful this roster was. You know, I mean, Aaron Rodgers has kind of changed a bit in the past few years, but, you know, it is kind of easy to forget now that he really did carry a lot of these teams, and they were hot starting the year. You know, this was a 4-1 team before the injury. And, you know, they totally bombed after that. When you look at who was playing on this team and who was starting, I mean, looking at it now, I mean, this is a pretty awful roster. So let's go through it. A quarterback, obviously, Aaron Rodgers. Brett Hundley, starting at running back, Aaron Jones. We still had Aaron Ripkowski at fullback there. This was the year when they drafted Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones, and Devontae Mays all in 1 year. At wide receiver, Devontae Adams. This is still pre-breakout, or I guess this is the year he kind of started to break out. And behind him, we have old man Jordy, middle-aged man Randall Cobb, and after that, Geronimo Allison, Trevor Davis, Jeff Janis, Ty Montgomery. I mean, technically it was classified as a wide receiver at the start, but obviously ended up playing running back. Practice squad hero Michael Clark, a tight end Martellus Bennett, which I think, you know, is not a very fond memory for any of us. Lance Kendricks was still making an impact. Richard Rodgers. I mean, it's not a good list of skill position players. And then here we go into the offensive line. Tackles are really strong. Bakhtiari and Bulaga. Bulaga, oft injured. He only played 5 games that season. At guard, Jari Evans, Justin McCray, Lucas Patrick had just kind of started with the team. Lane Taylor still with the team. We still had Corey Linsley, which was really good, obviously. This is in the middle of his Iron Man streak, starting every single game, every single snap. You know, the O-line, awful guards. I mean, Lane Taylor, he was kind of like serviceable, but the O-line, had moments of struggle, and especially when McRae was in there. I mean, again, this is another hole to address. Defensive line. This was the only year where we got Kenny Clark, Mike Daniels, and Dean Lowry all together at the kind of at the cusp of Kenny's breakout. Montravius Adams still there. Going into the linebacker and edge department, we have Clay, obviously, Kyler Fackrell, Team Hero, Nick Perry, and Ahmad Brooks. I mean, Vince Beagle. We go to the off-ball linebacker, Blake Martinez, Joe Thomas, Jake Ryan. I mean, again, pretty slim pickings at linebacker. And then the biggest hole with this team, which everyone knew at the time, and was just coming off of the back of that 2016 playoff game against the Falcons, where we had Quinn Rollins, and Ladarius Gunter, Lindsey Pipkins, all starting and defending Julio Jones in the playoffs in the middle of his prime. I don't think anyone is missing those days. This is a time when we were still relying on Kevin King. Demarius Randall was still a central part of the team. Clinton Dix was still a starting safety. I mean, this is I think it's pretty easy to see there's a very depleted roster. And so Gutekunst gets hired in 2018. Ted Thompson's time with the team finishes. And here comes the, pivotal moment, the shifting of the team, a new era. And so here we go into the 2018 draft. So the first draft of Gutekunst's career, again, he's looking to make a big splash. He's looking to address some of these holes, but the Packers, they have their way, and he does have a leash, and he does have a long-term plan. And, this is kind of the first we see of his draft philosophy, the kind of like shotgun method of just drafting heaps of players at one position and just seeing what sticks. And so we start with the masterful drafting of Jair Alexander. They start at pick 15. They trade down and they trade up again. In the process, they get an extra first from New Orleans. And they still managed to get Jair Alexander. Derwin James was still on the board at their original position, which a lot of people really wanted to draft. And obviously he would have been a fantastic move, but I think looking back, we can probably say pretty confidently that Jair was probably the best pick they could have made at that spot. I mean, he obviously had that one season of injury, but he's shown flashes of defensive player of the year type caliber play. He definitely is not, his career is still on the up. Derwin James, again, he lost lots of time in his early career, especially, almost three full seasons worth of missed games with injuries, and a fantastic player. But as far as someone who's solidified themselves as a leader and permanent fixture within the team who can be relied upon as a number one talent in the DB room, it's really hard to get much better than Jair Alexander. And, this is the kind of guy who will be, a perennial all-pro player. Top 5 kind of guy. And it took him a few seasons to get going. But, again, the long-term plan worked out and was an absolute home run, A-plus pick. And honestly, one of the most incredible draft moves of any team, really, in the past 10 years. The fact that you can get an extra first the next year, and even if Savage, it doesn't work out, still kind of pending on that one, it's still a fantastic move, and it's just an incredibly intelligent move. And it's this whole thing of looking into the future while still addressing the present. And I think that's just a perfect indication of the good when it comes to Gut. Following that, fan favorite Josh Jackson, Oren Burks, the slew of wide receivers, Jamon Moore, MVS, EQ, and guys like Cole Madison, J.K. Scott get drafted this year, Hunter Bradley, Oren Burks. Basically, besides really Jair, it's a bit of a dud. I mean, when you draft a special teamer in the 5th round, they need to have something. I mean, for a punter, so many undrafted punters end up becoming fantastic players, and it's such a position that has such a hard prediction going into the pros, that when you make a bet on a player in the 5th round, it probably should pay off a bit more than it did. And he is playing for the Chargers now, so I don't think he's like a total dud of a player, but for what he did for this team, I think there's a bit of miscalculation on Gute's part. Fantastic holder, not so sure about his raw punting ability with the team. MVS, one of my favorite Packers players over the past couple of years, and seeing him progress from the 5th rounder to a really integral fixture within the team. He obviously got ragged on a lot, and the death threats and things like that, and now he has a ring. Good for him, but I think he was actually really underappreciated in his time here, and I personally like him a lot more than Lazard. I just think his skill set was just so fantastic. He was a fantastic blocker, a big, fast dude. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be a number 1 receiver on any team, but I mean, man, he can play, and he is a really, really good deep threat. I'm happy to see him having success now, and he there's no doubt that he elevated the offense when he was there. And I think his absence was a big reason why they didn't win this playoff game in 2021. So yeah, that's the 2018 draft. So the roster is still far from perfect at this point. This is the season when the Bears are on the up. We kind of miss out on like the Khalil Mack thing, which Gutey was reportedly very in on. Again, this is kind of another transitory period. Mike Pettin is hired. We're kind of looking to improve the defense. No more Dom Capers, no more. Just trying to get better. And like I said, it's the first year in a multi-year plan. So again, going through the roster, it's kind of similar starters. Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams still starting there. No more Ripkowski. Now we have Dan Vitale. Wide receiver is still pretty grim. The infamous Jimmy Graham signing. Mercedes Lewis is signed this year. We can see that Gutey is trying his best to address problems fast, and he's taking a more aggressive approach than we had seen in years past. Obviously, Jimmy Graham didn't work out, but I can definitely understand the sentiment. We're kind of a bit snake bit there with our luck and tight ends, and we're still looking to rectify that even this year, even with our rookies. But we started to get a glimpse into his philosophy, the aggressive pursuit of fixing positions. He's not going to rely necessarily on like a 5th rounder wide receiver to fix a problem. He tried his best to get multiple different players to kind of fill in, and obviously Devontae Adams had shown potential as a number 1 receiver at this point. He brings in Mo Wilkerson, who has his career really tragically ended by Kentrell Bryce breaking his leg. Friendly fire, broken leg. It's pretty brutal. I didn't think he was ever going to be amazing, but I think he would have been kind of similar to what they got out of like Jerron Reed this year. They come in with a few more linebackers. This is the year where we have Antonio Morrison, Corey Tuma come in. These kind of guys. Oren Burks, they're still not really sure how to exactly use them. This is the year when Bashaud Breeland joins halfway through the year and has a nice finish to the year. Crazy Tony, Raven Green, these kind of guys that made a bit of a name for themselves as temporary Packers. But I really, it was a fun year, because for me it was like almost similar to this year. There wasn't really large expectations for them to go in and win the Super Bowl. I didn't feel like they were like wasting time or wasting a window. It was really, it was evidently a transitory period. This is the year when they go 7-8-1, right? It was definitely an interesting season. I think the fact that Mike Pettin got so much out of the defense was really promising. The amount of sacks, I really enjoyed what they did with this team, and still very like lacking on the edge rushes. Still, it's a rookie Jair. You can't really expect a rookie to immediately fix your DB room. But I just think it was a good start. And at the time it felt better than it does now. But the fact that you get one perennial all-pro caliber player and really overachieving from the 5th rounder. Not the best, but, this is kind of like a B grade, B plus grade off season for him. And just like, it's the start. It's the start of a program. Moving forward to 2019, this is where it starts to get interesting. This is where we start to see him really solidify himself as the GM. The very, very famous 2019 off season. As soon as I remember scrolling on Twitter when this happened, as soon as the window opened, it was like bang, 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 free agent, big contracts. Gut was eager to improve. This is kind of the difference between him and Ted Thompson. He is more aggressive, and obviously, they come from the same tree and they do have some similar philosophies as far as wanting to draft and develop. But in this window, they thought that this might have been the last or second last year of Aaron Rodgers. They still weren't fully sure how long he was going to be around. He's 35 at this point. They go out and they try to surround him with talent immediately. And man, what a change up. And it obviously paid off in a big way. This team goes 13-3, admittedly probably overachievers, but 13-3 and 13-3 is 13-3. They made the playoffs. There's a second seed. They eventually get, they get that incredible win against the Seahawks. They kind of learn how they're going to win, how they're going to run this team. Matt LaFleur comes in, totally rejuvenates the energy of this team. No more McCarthy. Mike Penton is still around, but no more Joe Philbin. Again, this is the Packers start to feel young again. They start to feel fun again. They feel cool. Eventually, they do kind of come back down to earth a little bit. But, the defense, I think some people do forget, the defense was mega, mega hot at the start of the year. There's a video from Boldy. I think he says, why the Packers is a top 3 defense. And this is, about week 4 or 5. And, I think, we did kind of see that cool down a bit. But we saw glimpses and we saw flashes. The offense still struggled a little bit. The first year of a new system, it's always a little bit awkward, especially with an old quarterback who's only ever been really in the one system his whole career. But it was fun. It was a really fun season. They won games they shouldn't have won. And, even with that brutal, heartbreaking 49ers loss, I think it was really hard to be upset with how the season ended. It's this is the culmination of these initial moves. If you go into the 2019 draft, this is the year when they draft Rashawn Gary, as I mentioned before. Again, another. I think he has a defensive player of the year in him. I think he had a good chance to win last year had he not been injured. He really is the heart and soul of that defensive line next to Kenny Clark. They get Darnell Savage, and like I said, jury's still out on him. This is probably going to be his last season in Green Bay if he doesn't pan out. Elton Jenkins, man, what a steal in the second round. One of the best, most versatile linemen in the entire league. Even off the back of an ACL injury, still playing at such a high level when it comes to playing in the interior. I think personally, I think he can survive at right tackle, but we kind of got an unfair look at him last year. Again, coming off the injury, the mobility is a bit of a question mark, and you don't need as much of that as a guard as you do in tackle. So I do think if he had another crack at it, he probably would be better, but I think it's hard to argue that his natural position isn't in the interior because, he's just so good in there. He's an all-pro caliber player in the interior. And, he can play left guard, right guard, center. I think left tackle is probably better than right tackle for him, which is still not out of the question, by the way, for him to fill in for Bark if Bark is traded or released or let go, blah, blah, blah. I think that's still in the cards, for him to play at left tackle into the future. But again, he got an extension last year, well-deserved, and man, it's one of the most universally loved players in the league. Even what a fantastic pick in round 2. We see this the continuation of the third round curse here. Jace Sternberger, supposed to come in as a receiving tight end, has a concussion in the preseason that derails his entire rookie season. He just never recovers. It's nice to see him leading the USFL in touchdowns now, but I think it became pretty clear that he wasn't an NFL caliber player. We get guys like Kingsley Keke, who again had kind of a strange departure from the team. despite showing some good flashes on the defensive line. We got Kadar Holman, Dexter Williams, Ty Summers, I mean, man, 7th round pick. I mean, yeah, eat your heart out, man. I mean, he was again, like another really important part of the special teams. Super athletic kind of guy, but I don't think anyone expected him to ever be a starter. But I mean, like a fun presence to have on the team, and a really good special team on a team that didn't have many at all. But yeah, 2019 draft, I think, you never expect you never expect a GM to draft 7 starters in every single round. You really just want like one good guy, a couple decent guys, maybe just get a couple backup second string type players, and that's a good draft. I mean, like the draft, obviously you want the stars, but realistically, what you need to expect is players who can contribute, players who have roles in the NFL, and players who have room to grow. And I think on the face value, the decisions that Gutey made, addressing safety, Clinton Dix was traded in the middle of the 2018 season. Again, I do identify with his strategy, even if some of the picks themselves did not work out. And again, getting Rashawn Gary and Elton Jenkins in the same draft, I mean, again, that's like, it's sick. It's good. They're two high-end starters. There's not really much more you can ask for than that. And here we go. That kind of has defined Gutekunst's tenure. 2020, this is the best season that the Packers have had in the past almost 10 years now. Jordan Love, of course, is drafted. The kind of beginning of the end for Aaron Rodgers, the permanently fractured relationship, all the drama, the Pat McAfee stuff, all the nonsense, and the heartbreak that led to the separation. And now Aaron Rodgers is with the Jets, but this is kind of all where it started. Aaron Rodgers was not playing at his MVP level self in 2019, and the team, understandably, was looking to replace him or prepare for the future. That's what this team does. That's their philosophy. And this is kind of a funny period because they did really go all in. This was kind of the year that the Gutekunst hire was building up to, right? And really, I mean, it worked. Like, this team was fucking good. Really, really fucking good. I mean, for my money, the best top end of any roster in football at this point. The roster is entirely revamped. We'll go to that in a second. But, I mean, this was such a good team. I mean, the best offense in the league, most efficient offense in the league. I really tried to find the stats on this, but because I remember during the season talking about like the red zone success rate, and it was like 80%. I kind of struggled to find those numbers again, also because I don't have a PFF subscription. Maybe that doesn't help. But one of, if not the best, red zone offense of all time. I mean, you go through the stats, man. Like, their scoring percentage in away games was 80%. I mean, that's fucking ridiculous. On 56% of their offensive drives that weren't like kneels or like spikes, they scored points. Like, absolutely incredible. Even though J.K. Scott wasn't the greatest punter, then it doesn't really matter if you're not really punting. I mean, man, this team was so much fun to watch. I mean, every single week, just lighting the world on fire. I mean, the Jordan Love pick, if nothing else, I would say probably directly led, or partially directly led to the back-to-back MVPs. I mean, that first game, that Vikings opener, oh boy, that was some of the best quarterbacking I've ever seen in my life. I mean, you go back to that game, seriously, go back and watch that game. Even, you don't even need to go through the highlights. Every throw from the first to the last, how many touchdowns they scored just off the back of pure quarterback mastery. And, we see the Matt LaFleur offense really take shape. I mean, this team was so much fun. It was so beautiful to watch. And I think, to be fully honest, I do think the COVID season that did impact that. The fact there was no crowds, I think, definitely impacted it and probably made them better than they would have been otherwise. But man, again, this was a fucking good team. Really, really good team. Davante Adams solidifies himself as the best wide receiver in the league. They find key free agents to kind of plug holes. I mean, Chris Barnes is like such a great addition at linebacker. John Runyon Jr. comes in. Like AJ Dillon, these guys, like even like Jonathan Garvin, 7th round rookie, but he's played like more snaps than he probably should have as a 7th round edge player. This team was just so much fun, man. Like, in my opinion, they had the best quarterback, indisputably, really, the best cornerback, Jair Alexander. Corey Linsley played his ass off that year, best center in the league, the best wide receiver in the league, as I just mentioned, the best tackle in the league, David Bakhtiari, and really the one good year of Darnell Savage, him and Adrian Amos end up being like the best safety duo in the league. Those 4 free agents, the Smith brothers. Obviously Z had a hotter 2019 season, but he's still solid in 2020, even with like injuries and things like that. Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, Adrian Amos is like the most solid safety in the league. Barely ever makes mistakes. Gets more interceptions. He's more of a playmaker than he's been previously in his career. Billy Turner really steps up as with the tackle depth. Starting off as a guard, he slots into tackle and plays even better. I think he's kind of like an average to slightly above average starter in the league. But that year in that system, with that level of quarterback play, I mean, this team was hot. It was really, really hot. Let's we'll go over this roster, right? So again, for my money, probably the best top end of any roster. The depth that comes into question. We'll talk about that in a second. But Aaron Rodgers, AJ Dillon, fan favorite Tyler Ervin is playing snaps. I mean, wow, how much fun was that? Aaron Jones is there. Jamal Williams last season. We get that. There's last couple of games, and again, what a fun player. Davante's doing his thing. We got Alan Lazard, obviously MVS. The big Robert Tonyan season where he leads the league in touchdowns for tight ends. Mercedes Lewis solidifies himself as this solid player who's just basically your sixth offensive lineman. Jimmy Graham is finally gone. We've got a bit of a youth injection happening. Like I mentioned before, Elton Jenkins is starting. Bakhtiari, Lucas Patrick, Billy Turner, Ricky Wagner is coming to fill in. This team is just like so good. The offensive infrastructure was just so good. Even the defense, Mike Daniels is gone now, but we're getting good production out of these kind of like low end free agents. Billy Wynn was kind of fun for a few games there. Snacks played on this team for a game. Like I mentioned before, Chris Barnes. Rashawn Gary is our 3rd edge rusher. He's still in development, but I mean, physical freak. Jair Alexander has the best season of his career. This DB room is almost like a strength at this point. Totally. Like from being the worst cornerback room probably in the league to being incredibly strong, had the best cornerback in the league, and this is still the best defense that they had in recent memory. Even with those flashes in some of the Joe Barry teams we'll talk about, this team was they just had everything going for them, and the unfortunate Bakhtiari injury kind of really derailed that going into the offseason. But I mean, if there was any season to win the Super Bowl, man, this would have been it. A bit of a bittersweet memory, this one. But something I do want to talk about, though, is, I've mentioned here we've gotten some high-end starters through these drafts already. Rashawn Gary, Elton Jenkins, Alexander. But the thing we start to see in this team that does become evident with some of these injuries, this is a pretty healthy team, but some of those key injuries like Bakhtiari, we see that this team doesn't really know how to deal with with injuries to those players. There's no backup plan for Bakhtiari. Well, which is kind of like that old Peyton Manning quote that, like we don't practice fucked. But still, like the depth on this team was lacking. I mean, Jair Alexander is fantastic. Kevin King was solid to, average there. But, behind those guys, it's like Will Redmond, Kadar Holman. Let me look up here. Josh Jackson is still kicking around on the team, basically like in the doghouse. Like Henry Black is still a backup safety. Shannon Sullivan is our starting nickel. Which is like, again, it's fine when everyone's healthy, but as soon as something goes wrong, they were pretty, you're pretty boned there. And because we were so healthy in this season, it didn't show as much. But as we get into 2021 here, and they kind of had to make a lot of changes to that, and they still struggle with that today. Something I talk about quite often is that this team, they love to build from the top down, and kind of as a result, a lot of the like second stringers do get neglected, and we kind of end up with, in my opinion, a lot of positions where the top is really good, the starter is fantastic, and the second string player is really like a third string quality type player. And like even like Alan Lazard, right? It might be a little bit controversial. I was really not a big Alan Lazard fan. I thought he was like fine, but the fact that you're running with Alan Lazard as your number 2 receiver, and you're still not drafting or signing any like priority value wide receivers, not ideal. Like not ideal at all. Because again, it's if Devontae is out with injury, you can kind of make do. But I mean, really, like Alan Lazard is not the type of guy you want to be taking primary receiving snaps. He can flash, but I mean, man, Gmo flashed. Geronimo Allison had those like incredible, spectacular catches once every like 4 or 5 games, and then just did nothing the rest of the year. And Alan Lazard was better than Gmo. I'm not going to roast him that badly, but when you're depending on him to have like significant snaps and get open on his own outside of Devontae Adams and outside the system, which did kind of cool down a little bit in years following, like that's not the greatest position to be in. That's one of the weaknesses I do find with Gut, is that he does struggle, in my opinion, to properly address depth. And again, I think if they had a better plan for Bakhtiari going out or potential backup, maybe they do win that Tampa Bay game in which their O-line got absolutely manhandled. And again, speaking in retrospect, it's easy to make judgments, but you kind of see the cracks beginning to show a little bit there. And as we get into 2021, that's when it goes kind of full tilt, right? Just absolutely demolished by injuries. We have a few, like obviously there's a few like bright spots, and Rashawn Gary steps up as the number 1 linebacker, as like a arguably top 5 edge in the league. We get really lucky with guys like Devondre Campbell. We sign Whitney Merciless as the backup, like a third stringer. At this point, Patton is gone after a historic rushing defense collapse in 2020. Joe Barry is here now. They want to prioritize physicality and the tackling, which they did do really well actually for 2021. But again, the guys that are behind the guys you want, Jair Alexander goes down, and you're all of a sudden Eric Stokes is the number 1 corner. Talented rookie, but no more Kevin King, no more Jen Sullivan. You're kind of just relying on these guys who are unproven, and Gut is forced to make do, right? And again, this team, another 13-3 season, they end up as the number 1 seed once again. And I think that really speaks to his ability to sign these incredible free agents just off the street. Rasul Douglas, he's our number 2 corner now, and he was signed off the Arizona practice squad. He comes in and wins us the game against Arizona, the undefeated Arizona Cardinals at that point, And, we are like extremely injured. No Devontae Adams. And the guys who, like, the reason why we win these games is because of these random free agents that we picked up. And, you can't really give Goot enough credit for these kind of signings, because really it's like bargain bin players who just fill in as starters and are still around. Campbell and Douglas both were extended, and with like good reason. Linebacker had been such a struggling position for so long on this team. And, the guy we find who becomes a first-team All-Pro is someone we just signed like a week before the season or like into the camp. It's basically like bottom of the market vet min kind of type deal. And I think that's one of those things that Gut is really, really good at. And like we'll get into the draft here. This is when Corey Linsley departs. We draft Josh Myers in the second. Eric Stokes, like I mentioned before, has a really fantastic rookie season. The third round curse continues. Amari Rogers, Royce Newman, I'd probably higher on him than most, but evidently not a starting caliber player just yet, if not ever. Still holding out hope. TJ Slayton, Shamar John Charles, Cole Van Lanen, Isaiah McDuffie, still with the team, and Kylan Hill. This is kind of a better draft, but again, like I mentioned before, the depth. We have Eric Stokes and Josh Myers who are starters. Mario Rogers is gone. Royce Newman is like a second or third string guard. TJ Slayton is really probably a second string quality player who's just being asked to fill in as a number one. Shamar John Charles is like probably not an NFL player. Isaiah McDuffie is showing up a little bit, but again, second to third string quality player realistically. Good special teamer. We just kind of struggle with the depth here. There's still not a really reliable second option at receiver. Again, I loved MVS, but he was oft injured this season. And there really wasn't a second guy to go to after Devontae who you knew would, like when we had, that like middle of 2010s, Jordy is the number one. You have Cobb as your number two. Devontae is your number three. I mean, man, like even Devontae as a number three was more reliable and better, frankly, than MVS and Alan Lazard. And even with the drops, right? Like they really, granted, Gut tried with Amari Rogers, but even then, he was always going to be a bit of a project, kind of fitting into like an actual like working receiver role. And that is kind of what we see here. The bones of this team are still quite good in 2021, thanks to Gut. But the low end, the depth, does still struggle. And if it wasn't for the fact that we had Devontae, this would probably be, bottom five. I mean, it kind of is bottom five. Between 21 and 2022, besides Devontae, like I mentioned. And even like safety, this is when Savage kind of cools down a bit. Amos starts to show signs of age, and it just seems like there's not much plan behind them when Henry Black is starting games. Even like Will Redmond would have been nice to have around, we do see like guys like Josh Nyman step up in the absence of Bakhtiari. But Robert Tunyon tears his ACL, and there is like literally no one behind him. Mercedes Lewis does his best, but he's not a receiving tight end. DeGuara, still waiting on him to show up even now. Again, still holding out hope, but the fact of the matter is you're kind of banking on players to become better versions of themselves, not to continue to produce at a high level or even an average level. And again, that's one of those things that I find with this team is that, it's all well and good to have players elevated by the system and, become better versions of themselves and, hope for progress and development. But you also just need players who are just good, like straight up just good. Josh Myers, I think, is a perfect example of this. He's like mega inconsistent player, has flashes of good, has a lot of flashes of awful. And, it's kind of like you're depending on him to be propped up by the system, or, you're hoping for those good moments. And then you have someone like Elton Jenkins, perfect example as well. Like, he's someone who's just good, even coming off the injury, even as a rookie, he's just a good player, and we need more of that. There's like a few cornerstones, and in between, there's just not many solid players who are actually dependable. That's something I think we really see with a lot of these kind of like the teams that have won championships in recent years, right? They they get lucky on like a draft signing or a free agent, and they become like pivotal parts of the team. And we did have that to some degree in these seasons, but I just think a lot of the cornerstones. I mean, like Robert Tonyan, even, right? They look good when they overperform, but when they revert back to who they really are, you really kind of feel that that lack of talent. And not to say these necessarily terrible players, but NFL starters on a good team, not so sure. And again, another controversial opinion. We talked about this on the pod before, with the episode with Sanjay. Like, I'm not a really big believer in John Runyon as a good NFL starter. I think he's perfectly serviceable. I think he's like a league average kind of starter, very, very high end number 2 backup. Like, I'd love to have a lot of John Runyons on the team, like that kind of level of player. But as a starter, I think you should be looking to replace him. And maybe they are. Maybe that's what the Sean Ryan draft pick was. But still kind of waiting to be seen. Anyway, bit of a tangent, but this was also, I will say, this was one of my favorite seasons, 2021. I was convinced this team was going to win the Super Bowl. I told the story before, but I was still working as a chef at the time, and I told my boss that because I had just started this place, like not even like a month, and I told him, I was like, if the Packers go to the Super Bowl, I'm just going on holiday like next week, and like there's nothing you can do about it. Which is, my bank account is definitely thankful that didn't happen. But I was ready to like pack up my shit and just go, because I really thought that this was the team, when they finally dealt with adversity, when they finally had to come back and, pull themselves back together. I thought this was the team that could actually do it. When they got punched in the mouth, they'd punch back. And, they did for a large part of the season. Even that playoff game, they kind of did, but the special teams really just, let's not talk about that. But as far as what Gut had done, I think his adjustment, despite a lot of these like missed draft picks, his adjustment was really kind of what propped his team up. And so we get into 2022, the last season of Aaron Rodgers. Let's take a minute to just look back at these draft classes. So at this point, we've gone through 4 years of drafting. Out of those 4 years, we have actual starters who are still with the team now. Jair, that's one player from 2018. Again, I give him credit for MVS. That's a player and a half, or player and 3/4. I like MVS. 2019, Rashawn Gary, good player. Elton Jenkins, good player. Daniel Savage, to be determined. So that's 3.5 players so far, or maybe 3 and 2 half-halves. 2020, Jordan Love, still massive, humongous question mark. AJ Dillon, in all likelihood, probably his last season with the team. John Runyon Jr., he's a player, right? He's started for this team, whatever, we give him that. Again, that's like 6-7 players from 3 drafts. And 5, maybe really like 5 starters. I mean, a backup running back in the second round. I love AJ Dillon, but come on. He's still a backup, and he hasn't shown any signs of being really capable of consistently taking over that running back job. I mean, quickly, I before we get to the last year, I do think that if AJ Dillon is gone and Aaron Jones is gone, I don't think they're too upset about that. Obviously the investment, but I don't think they're like, oh, I really wish that we could have kept him around. I just think that they just draft another running back in the first or second, which hurts me to say that, but I just think that they can quite easily move on from Dillon, as much as I do like him. And then 2021, Eric Stokes, strong first season, struggling second season plus injury. We don't know if he's ever going to be the same. Not Goot's fault, granted. Still to be determined from the first round pick. Josh Myers, again, colossal question mark. Not really much else after that besides TJ Slayton. Again, kind of like a number 2 type player. And yeah, so at this point, there's like really less than like 8 legit starters. I mean, yeah, less than that. Less than 8 legit starters. A couple cornerstones, and like 2/3 of the rest of the picks are all either not in the NFL or bottom of the roster type players. Not even really many depth pieces that actually mean anything. Royce is really probably going to be off the team in a year or two. Looking through this, Jake Hansen, I mean, he's not even an NFL player. Don't get me started on him. DeGuara, this, to summarize without rambling too much, even though I already have, there's really there's a lot of holes from these drafts. And, Gut has tried, and the high-end picks, the high-value picks have generally been quite fantastic. The first-round picks have been really good. But beyond that, it's really, really patchy. And that is really what has led to the team being where it is this year. 2022, again, the cornerstones are good, but behind them, it just gets worse. We'll take a look back at our starting roster for 2022. The running backs are still the same. We're depending on Randall Cobb to basically fill in as like a number 2 receiver. Lazard, is still playing significant snaps on this team. He was projected to be the number 1 receiver in the preseason, which I just thought was like such a joke. I mean, as I just said, I really don't like Lazard very much. Christian Watson, again, we'll get into how good this draft was, but a rookie filling in as like a starter on the team, it's objectively not a safe bet. The O-line is pretty solid. One of the things that Gut really does prioritize and draft every single year besides this most recent year. Defensive line is still pretty slim. They draft Wyatt and they have Slayton, but really Wyatt doesn't really start the season really at all. Clark is still doing it by himself. Dean Lowry is still somehow starting snaps. It's like Gut just, I don't know, maybe Dean had like some serious dirt on him or something. He needed to keep him on the team. Linebacker getting better. Again, like there's still good bones to this team, but we see the holes opening up and the things that have been neglected, wide receiver room, tight end room, we really start to feel that. They didn't have, to start this offseason, they had no tight ends on the roster. Like literally not a single tight end. Tyler Davis, special teamer, Josiah DeGuara, not really a tight end, fullback, third round fullback. It was grim. The holes in this team kind of caught up with them. And I think that's why they kind of missed the playoffs, because they were relying more on their cornerstones. They were relying more on the system that, whether or not it was Matt LaFleur's system, we will see, I guess, this year. But, the things that had been good for them in the past didn't work. When the scheme and the rest of the team wasn't able to prop up the weak parts of the team, what you're left with is an 8-9 team, and that's exactly what happened. Now, I will say, this draft was fucking phenomenal. Maybe a little bit early, but as a Christian Watson fan for life, pretty sick. Really good draft to come into this year. And still to be determined on how exactly that pans out. I mean, I did like a lot of these drafts when they happened, even though if they haven't fully succeeded now. But I mean, yeah, this could be really the turning point, and this could be the difference. This past draft, 2022, could be the difference between this team succeeding with Jordan Love and Jordan Love basically being out of the NFL. It could be the difference between Good's job, Matt LaFleur's job, and hiring whoever else to be the GM and the head coach. In my opinion, if we don't have this kind of draft, this could have been their last year. Let's go through this draft. Controversial first round pick. Obviously, this is the year when Devontae is traded. We get a first and a second. We do kind of see this thing with Gut where he uses his extra resources to draft luxuries, which, whatever. Like, I think that's a fine enough strategy. But linebacker in the first at, 15th or 16th overall. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, again, drafting a linebacker in the middle of the first round with your first round pick, Quay Walker, who is not even really a consensus first round pick. I love Quay, but kind of similar to the AJ Dillon pick, perhaps not the most intelligent use of resources, to be determined. I do really, really like Quay. Sorry, 22nd pick. I do really like Quay, but rich. It's a rich pick, objectively. Coming with Devontae Wyatt, Christian Watson, love of my life. Sean Ryan, to be determined. Really haven't seen anything at all out of him. Romeo Dobbs, again, banger of a pick. Zach Tom, man was born to be a Packer. Kingsley and Agbury, absolute home run. Tariq Carpenter is a 7th rounder, and he's sticking around the team probably for a couple of years, even just as a special teamer, whatever. Jonathan Ford, still to be determined, really. Rashid Walker, very promising tackle prospect. He could be, the next kind of Yosh Nijman type, if not just a guy. And Samori Toure, who's projected to be, a 3rd or 4th kind of receiver for the team this year. I mean, man, what an incredible draft. I mean, what an incredible way to recover from years of slightly above average to lackluster drafts. Quay is going to be the starting linebacker, if not in the middle of this season, next season. I think that someone mentioned that he was taking over number 1 snaps for some of the linebacker reps during minicamp, which is, take with a grain of salt. But again, I think he's going to be really good, incredibly physically talented. Devontae Wyatt, I loved Wyatt. I kind of liked Wyatt's skill set a bit more than Jordan Davis. I love Wyatt, and I really think he's going to have a big role in this team. Christian Watson, I think everyone knows at this point how much I love Christian Watson. He's going to be a number 1 receiver for this team for the foreseeable future. Teams were already game planning around him, against the Packers by the end of the season. It's only going to get tougher for him, but I mean, he's only going to get better. He's one of those players who is just good. He's just talented as fuck. Love Christian Watson. He bends the extra 2nd round pick from the Raiders to get Christian Watson, but honestly, I think fantastic pick. They mentioned that they would have happily picked him in the 1st as well. Dobbs going to be a starter, Tom going to be a starter, and Agbury 2nd. Edge. Future edge 3, edge 2. Once Preston is gone next year or the year after. Next year. This is such a good draft. This is the kind of draft that turns a franchise around. That Saints team where they had that banger draft was, I think, 2017, and just absolutely knocked it out of the park. This is that kind of draft. Best case scenario, if all these guys stick around, barring injury, blah, 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 blah. I mean, yeah, like I cannot say enough good things about this draft, and we saw evidence of how good this draft was in the season. It's not just a projection of, oh, I think he might be good doing this or like in this way. It's like a lot of these guys either are or will be just good players, and if not, like just very high in depth. I mean, like wow, love this draft. And that brings us to this season. A lot of projection, but kind of similar to 2018. It's like it's a bit of a free season. It's the start of a new era. So much young talent. We're going to be relying on young players, but not in a way that we're relying on rookie Christian Watson to get us to the Super Bowl in Aaron Rodgers last year. No, this is more like give these players a chance to grow and learn and become good NFL players. Give these guys a chance to just play, and that's why this season is so exciting. We don't have the Super Bowl hanging over our heads, and obviously it would be nice. I mean, fucking, that's pretty obvious, but yeah, we're not counting on that. It's not Super Bowl or bust this year. It's let's just be a good team. Let's just reel it in. Let's just be a good team. Let's be together and win some games. And again, I think this is another fantastic draft from Gut. We haven't seen a single snap from any of these guys, but I mean, the value and the way he's targeted these positions, I mean, I'm in love. We see again this kind of shotgun method, right? He drafts Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, two of the most talented tight ends in this class. I mean, some of my favorites, truly. Luke Musgrave, like all the physical potential in the world. Tucker Kraft, again, he's like, we kind of joked about this leading into the draft, but it was almost like a challenge to not draft a physically talented tight end in this year. But these guys are definitely two great ones to have, and I love Tucker Kraft. He was one of my guys that I wanted them to draft. Nice rhyme. And then 3 wide receivers once again. Like, I think Gut hadn't realized, put himself in a bit of a silly position, relying on that kind of talent last year, and he's going in with Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Grant Dubose. What a steal in the 7th round. Bo Melton, Christian Watson, Samori Toure, Romeo Dobbs. I mean, like, that's a fun room. Like, there were years there where we were arguing over who was going to be like the 5th wide receiver. Oh, it's going to be Reggie Beagleton, or it's going to be Darius Shepard, or maybe it's Jake Kumro. Like, no, like, I want to be fighting over who's going to be the starter, who's the number 2. This is the kind of like talent level you want to see on a good team. This is how you build depth. Find multiple guys who can be starters and see who wins. Then that way you're left with maybe someone who's just a really fucking good backup. John Runyon. I think if you find a replacement for John Runyon, don't look to get rid of John Runyon. Have him around as a high level backup. Lucas Patrick, I think, is another great example of that. They have Lucas Patrick as like the backup guard. Obviously John Runyon won over him, but it's like someone like that, like who can actually like play. Not someone who's like, oh yeah, hypothetically he might be good, but blah, blah, blah. It's like these players who will be in contention for starting roles. I mean, Luke Musgrave is already the starter, just by virtue of lack of players there. But guys like Colby Wooden, Carl Brooks, they can challenge for snaps. Anthony Johnson will be challenging for snaps. Jaden Reed will be fighting Romeo Dobbs and Samori Toure for snaps as the number 2. Like, that's like what a fucking awesome position to be in. I really love the way they set themselves up this year. Lucas Van Ness, I think he's going to be really similar to Rashawn Gary. I don't expect to see much of anything from him this year. But when he does get that role, I expect him to be good. Like, we do like we do miss Mike Smith, but Jason Rebrovich is still a really, really good coach. And we see that from the edge play, Yeah, I mean, man, like what a fantastic draft. And like some of the moves that he made even last season, it seems like every single year Gut just finds these random ass free agents who have big roles. I mean, the best kick returner in the league off the street. and he only returned kicks for like half the season, and he still led the league in basically every single stat: return yards, average return depth, like efficiency, EPA. Like, that's incredible. Like, even like Rudy Ford, I don't think he's like necessarily the best NFL player ever, but he's fine. Like, he has juice, he has energy, he can do stuff. He's not like an active liability on the field. He's fine. Like, average starter. Like, that's fine. It's better than Darnell Savage is at this point. Better than Adrian Amos really is at this point. Yeah, I mean, man, like, even going back to like this is a couple years back, but like Tyler Evan, like that was like a fun pickup. That was a really fun pickup, and that added a lot to the offense. I think that's kind of what Gut does really well, is he picks up these random ass free agents, and I'm sure there'll be one this year. But between Chris Barnes, Devondre Campbell, Russell Douglas, Whitney Merciless, a bit more of a high profile kind of free agent, but still like off the street. Keyshawn Nixon, Rudy Ford, blah 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 blah. Like that, he is genuinely one of the best in the league at that. So yeah, we're kind of entering a period of positivity. It's the off season where hope does spring eternal, as we always say. But I think these past two drafts are really like, they're going to be a turning point. There's no arguing that. And now that Aaron Rodgers is not around to hide as many things, and not that he was doing much hiding last year, but now that the system is going to be, almost like a reset, things are going to be more raw. It's going to be more honest about the quality of the players that we have. There's not really many vets on the offensive side of the ball to kind of hold hands. Bring it on. I mean, I love the position he's put this team in. I love how he's recovered. He totally bucked the traditional philosophy of draft and develop, and he went all in like 3 years in a row, even when he shouldn't have. We can argue about whether or not he should have traded Aaron Rodgers after 2021, which I do believe they should have, but, like Westendorf says, their reigning MVP has never been traded and probably never will be. I think everything that he's done has made sense. I find it really difficult to disagree with many of the moves that he's made. Obviously, like, keeping some of the vets on, like Dean Lowry, I wish that he would have fought a bit more aggressively for wide receiver. But I can kind of understand where he's coming from, even if it wasn't the right decision looking back. But I do think this new era where, again, building this team up once again. I mean, like, let's do one last look over this roster. From where we were in 2018, barren, we are in such a better position now. Jordan Love, starting quarterback. Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. Lou Nichols, a running back. Wide receiver, we already gone through that. Tight end, already gone through that. O-line, Bakhtiari's there. Jenkins, Myers, Nyman or Tom on the right side. John Runyon. A bajillion guards and centers just waiting for opportunities behind them. Even the defensive line, as you mentioned, Carl Brooks and Colby Wooden will be fighting for jobs there. TJ Slayton, Chris Slayton, obviously Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt. I mean, there's just so much room to grow. I don't feel like we're really stuck at any position besides like safety, maybe. Like there's room to go up. And that's what I'm excited for. That's what everyone's excited for, right? I don't think I'm saying anything new. But I think with the departure of Aaron Rodgers and that trade, I mean, yeah, that trade was fantastic. What he got for that, and the fact that he's still prioritizing the future, just in case something happens with Love or in general, just putting himself in a better position with more resources. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers is not injured, they're going to get a first rounder for him for next year, as well as a very good second rounder this year, who ended up being Musgrave. So, like, I don't want to sound like I'm like a big Gut homer and I defend every single thing that he does ever, because he's not perfect. and he does do things wrong, and you can argue maybe he never should have drafted Jordan Love, but also I can understand it. I don't think he's made any stupid decisions. There's nothing he does where I'm like, oh man, that's fucking dumb. Like, he should be fired. No, like, he makes mistakes. Every GM makes mistakes. But he's shown the ability to recover. He's shown the ability to get good players and put this team in position to win. He's done it. He has assembled a Super Bowl caliber roster. They didn't get there. They didn't win. But the talent was there. Talent was not the issue. Even in 2021 with the injuries, talent was not the issue. And so that's I mean, look, I'm excited to see what Gut does. Ultimately, I do trust him. A lot of his decisions align with what I would have done. Let's not talk about Joe Barry. And how much of that was Matt LaFleur, how much of that was Mark Murphy, how much of that was Gut, But I do think that this franchise ultimately is in a good position. I do think that a lot of the success that they've had in the past 6 years has been almost directly because of Gutekunst. Him hiring Matt LaFleur is part of that. Him surrounding players with talent is part of that. And again, last thing I'll say, this franchise is objectively in a good position to, where, even if that's just assessing Jordan Love and moving on to Caleb Williams or Drake May, even if that is just, assessing what we have on the roster before we, move on. I don't feel like I'm like, oh man, I'm stuck with Jordan Love. I'm like, no, I want to see. And I have confidence that the support system is going to be good and that good decisions will be made. So I'll leave you with that, guys. As always, you can find us on Twitter at NicholasGRGR and the podcast at @Outback_Packers. Of course, you can find Joe at Iowa_Joe86. Until next time, we'll see you later.